us, Dr. Ayer, an experienced management professional driving sustainable business practices from strategy to innovation to delivering growth. He has delivered successful outcome by thinking out of the box, driving change management and mentoring and leading large and diverse teams. Sir has adapted at identifying areas of strategic breakdown and evaluating multiple options from diverse, often unrelated areas and taking necessary steps to rectify the same by applying effective troubleshoot tools and methodologies. Sir is having a keen technical mind that allows for a fresh perspective to a problem situation and allows for drawing innovative parallels from diverse, unrelated field to a solved problem. Sir, a graduate of IIT Bombay and a PhD in mechanical engineering from University of Utah, his area of expertise span business strategies and innovation in management, sustainability, CSR, change management, and team building. An advocate of 4P model of sustainability, that is people, profit, planet, and principle. He helped in organizing develop responsibility sustainable strategies leading to ESG compliance and achievement of ESGs. I'm sure that after hearing this profile, our participant will like not me to speak more further, and that is why over to you, sir. It's an honor to have with you, sir.
Thank you, Divya, for that wonderful introduction. Good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure for me to be here to address you on something that I'm very passionate about, which is sustainable business strategies. Let me share my desktop with you, and where do I go for this? So, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir, we can see it. Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So let's have a look at what it is that we are going to be talking about today, and give you an idea of what is this paradigm of sustainable business strategy that I am talking about. What do I mean by a sustainable business strategy? Why is it important? And how are business strategies globally changing because of the way risks are coming up upon us? And how can we survive and be nimble and agile in the changing scenario so that our organizations can remain sustainable over time? So, what is strategy? As students of management, most of you must have studied what is a strategy. A strategy is nothing but a long-term plan for achieving something or reaching a goal. It's also the skill for making such plans. So, strategy is something that we need to have, irrespective of whether we are in business or even if we are planning for something like, say, achieving a gold in the Olympics, or whether it is to get good marks in an examination. We need to have a strategy. We need to have a plan. How are we going to address it? How are we going to make sure that we reach our goal? So that is what a strategy entails. The second thing which we talked about is sustainable business. Now, what is a sustainable business? A sustainable business, or what is also known as a green business, is an enterprise that has nominal impact or potentially a positive impact on the global or local environment, community, society, and economy. Please note that here we are not talking only about climate change. When we say a sustainable business, it encompasses the environment, it encompasses human relations, community, society, and the economy. So a business that strives to meet the quadruple bottom line. What is the quadruple bottom line? We will get to that in a little while. So the future belongs to the sustainable business. So what is a sustainable business? A sustainable business is an ethical business which is based on harmony between various stakeholders. It is a plan where the needs and the realistic aspirations of all stakeholders are realized. We will get to these terms as we go along in the presentation, so that I will keep jumping back and forth so that you're not lost between all these terms. What do I mean by these terms? I mean, there are traditional definitions for some of these terms, but I have my own definition for some of these terms, and I would like to share that with you today. Now, coming to a sustainable business strategy, what strategy would I call a sustainable business strategy? According to me, the basic tenet of any strategy is that it should ensure profitability. Any strategy which does not result in profitability is not a good strategy. The profitability can be in monetary terms, it can be in terms of goodwill, it can be in terms of building a stronger relationship with someone. So the profitability need not always be in monetary terms. But when we go into a strategy, the end result of the strategy should be that we are better off after going through the strategy than we were before we started on that strategy. So that is what I mean by ensuring profitability. The second factor which a business strategy should have is achieving longevity of the business without compromising the profitability. What I mean by that is, let's say I'm looking at befriending someone, entering into a friendship with someone. I am not looking at friendship for a few days. So for me, that effort which I'm going to put in to befriend someone is profitable only if it is long lasting. We are looking at a relationship which lasts years. So that's what I mean by achieving longevity. And finally, and most importantly, this profitability and longevity should be achieved without sacrificing stakeholder aspirations. What I mean by that is, if I'm going to become friends with someone, it cannot be a one-way street. I mean, I cannot be exploiting him all the time. He also should be in a position where he is going to derive some benefit from becoming a friend. So that is what I mean by not sacrificing stakeholder aspirations. Let's take the example of this webinar. I mean, I see that there are about 60 plus participants in this webinar. You have joined this webinar with certain aspirations. Maybe you need to understand some new terms, or maybe it's just a novelty of listening to me speak. What is this sustainability business, business sustainability strategy that he's talking about? So that is your aspiration in being a participant in this seminar. So if that aspiration is not going to be satisfied, you're not going to listen to me a second time. So That's what I mean by ensuring that we're not sacrificing stakeholder aspirations. So why sustainable business? Why are we talking about this topic today? In these changing times, ESG, which stands for environmental, social, and governance principles, are becoming more and more relevant. Investors are looking at ESG compliances. I mean, ESG is a buzzword, and we see that even students are looking to join organizations for jobs which are ESG compliant. They want to know if that company or that organization is going to be sustainable over the long run. So ESG is one of the metrics which is used for determining the sustainability of an enterprise. So what comes under ESG? Under environmental norms, we get climate change. We talk about biodiversity. We talk about natural resources, carbon emission, air and water pollution. Under social issues, we talk about health and safety, human rights, labor standards, product liability, privacy, data security. And under governance, we talk about diversity and inclusion, transparency, board independence, ownership, ethics, and executive compensations. These are just some of the terms which come under ESG. So you can see that in ESG discussions, profits is not talked about because profits are implied. You cannot have, as I said, any enterprise without a profit. So how can you make profits at the same time comply with all these contrasting demands which are being expected from the industry? So having a sustainable business strategy is becoming more and more the need of the hour. So that brings us to what is commonly known as the triple bottom line. This is a very common terminology used in sustainability, where you talk about balancing people, planet, and the profit. That's the triple bottom line, which ensures that businesses remain sustainable. Over the years, there have been some criticism about this triple bottom line, and there have been instances where organizations which are blatantly not sustainable have scored a very high rating on the sustainability index. So there is some criticism on the efficacy of the triple bottom line, and this has led for the propagation of what is known as the quadruple bottom line. So what comes under the quadruple bottom line is that along with people, profits, and planet, you also talk about principles. When we say principles, what we mean is the morals which guide the business. Are we following uniform standards? I mean, do we react differently to the same circumstance depending on who is on the other side of the table? So these are the kind of compulsions. Let's say you have a situation which can be right under one context and wrong under another context, just because the people involved in are different. That is not a principled organization, because right is right and wrong is wrong, irrespective of who is across the table from you. So because of this lack of principles, and the triple bottom line measures only profit, people, and planet on a gross level, we find that our business strategies are not very sustainable. And we see a lot of industry going through this churn, and we find that people are looking at, or industry especially is looking at this or any situation for that matter as a tool for exploiting the other constituents in the system. So if I put them side by side, you can see the triple bottom line on the left and the quadruple bottom line on the right. And the absence of a moral compass is very evident. And that is what we are trying to correct by propagating the quadruple bottom line as a paradigm for a sustainable business. So now let us look at, we were again going back to an earlier slide which we saw of what is a sustainable business strategy. And at that time, we had talked about something called as stakeholder aspirations. Now, who is a stakeholder? In any enterprise, who is a stakeholder? A stakeholder is any individual or business entity who has material involvement in your business and has a direct or indirect impact on the performance of the business. So I guess this is very clear. I mean, if you're talking about a business entity, you would have the employees who are working there, you would have the suppliers, you would have vendors, you would have customers, you have the owners, all of the agencies who have a direct reason to be associated with that enterprise. So they would be a stakeholder. Now, I have a second category of stakeholders in here who is equally important. So any individual or entity whose circumstance or behavior has a direct impact on the performance of the business. What do I mean by this? This entity does not have a direct stake in your business. There is no involvement in your business, but their circumstance can affect your business. Let me give you an example for the second case. Let's say we have some investors in our business. The investor holds a significant chunk of shares in the business, and they have a good amount of control in the business. The same investor also holds shares in industries which are highly polluting. There are threats to shut down the other business, and that particular investor has a bad name associated with him because he is connected with a business which is highly polluting, which is highly unethical. By his very association with your business can get a bad name, because what people would say is, look, he's with one industry which is highly polluting, which is highly unethical. How do I know that this business also is not unethical? His being caught in an unethical position can put your business in a bad, sticky situation. So that is what I mean by an entity whose circumstance has a direct impact on the performance of your business. You could lose vendors, you could lose shareholders, because one of your major shareholders is someone who has a bad reputation. So you have to be very careful about your stakeholders. Now, who are the stakeholders? We talked about some of these. The stakeholders can broadly be classified under 4 categories. The first category of stakeholders are the ones who are dependent on you for their business. They could be, what I mean by that is, they are your customers. They are people who pay money to you for endorsing their products. They may be using you as a marketing channel for their product. So there are people whose survival depends on your product. So they are dependent on you. The second category of stakeholders are those who you depend on. They could be your suppliers, your vendors, your employees. So anyone whose performance and whose integrity with you is key for your business to survive. So that's the second category of stakeholders. The third category of stakeholders are the ones who are the owners, the investors, and the shareholders, etc., of the business. The people who have put money into the business. And finally, the fourth category of stakeholder is the society, environment, governmental agencies, etc. So the difference between any strategy and a sustainable business strategy is incorporating the fourth pillar, so to speak, that of society, environment, and compliances as an equal partner in your business. Without this clear understanding, it becomes very difficult for you to envisage a business which is sustainable. So how do you work on a sustainable business strategy? When you sit down to map a strategy which is sustainable, the first thing you do is the stakeholders get together and they articulate their aspirations. If I am going to be a part of this business, a part of this strategy, what am I expecting? Your employees may say, I need a certain percentage of annual raise. I'm coming in for job security. I'm coming in for various reasons. Customers can come in and say, we are looking for this kind of a quality. We are looking at this. We're looking at that. So there are various aspirations which they are for them to be associated with your organization. The owners come in and say, okay, look, I need to make some profit out of this business. I'm looking at, say, 8%, 10%, 20%, whatever, a number which they put as a profit. And then they also need to, create a certain standing for them in society, whatever aspiration there are. So, and finally, the environment will say, look, I want you can do all that you want to do, but make sure that at the end of the day, you're working with only renewable energy, you're not using coal-based energy, either wind or solar or hydro. Work with energy which is clean, make sure that there is no waste, your air pollution is low, your water pollution is low, there is no landfill which is happening, etc., etc., etc. Society will come in and say, I want that you create more jobs, I want that employment should come down. I mean, unemployment should come down. Various aspirations are put forth by the various stakeholders. So what you do is you sit down and you note down all these aspirations. That's the first step which happens. Once you note down these aspirations, then you look for interconnection. How are all these aspirations related to each other? Because it cannot be that you have only aspirations. Because if the employee says, I'm looking at 15% increment year on year, the owners will say, fine, I will expect 10% extra production from you. Something. So every aspiration which you are talking about will have an offsetting aspiration from the other stakeholders. So you need to look at what are the interrelations between these various aspirations. And that needs to be mapped very clearly. Once you have mapped this, you also should work on your strategy should be such that all of these aspirations are realized simultaneously. You cannot have a situation where we have, as I said, the four categories of stakeholders. I'll say, okay, first I'll achieve the aspirations of the owners. Then I will look at the aspirations of the customers. Employees are anyway not going to be going anywhere. They'll be working with me for many years. I will consider them third. And if anything is left over, I will look at the environment. It does not work that way. All the four categories of stakeholders have equal importance. So all their aspirations have to be realized simultaneously. So if the environment aspires that you should have control on your emissions, then you should have control on your emissions from day one. If you're looking at renewable energy, ensure that your plan is such that by the time the other aspirations are met, let's say, for example, your owners are looking at 12% profit year on year. By the time you have reached 12% profit, you have also achieved a situation where you are 100% renewable. So these aspirations have to be met simultaneously, not sequentially. If you are going to work in a situation where you are going to be sequential, you will never be sustainable. So how is this different from the conventional business strategy? So when we look at sustainable business strategy, or when we look at strategy in general, strategy can be classified under three stages. The first stage is what is called as the enabling stage. The second stage is the activation stage. And the third stage is the transformational stage. Now, what is happening today, and if you look at the leaders in sustainability, they have moved away from enabling, and a lot of them are in the activational stage. Some of them are breaching the threshold of transformational stage, but they're not yet at transformational behavior. So your strategy has to move rapidly from being an enabling based strategy to one which is either activational or transformational. What are these stages? We will come to that in the subsequent slides. But one thing we have to be very clear, the strategy has to provide very clear signals of intent, and the responsibilities for achieving that intent has to be very clearly projected so that all categories of stakeholders are in agreement with the strategy. You cannot have a strategy which only benefits one category of stakeholder. The other, all categories, all four categories have to be in agreement. Otherwise, the business strategy will not be sustainable. So what do I mean by the various phases? In the enabling stage, what you would have are what are called as framing enablers and process enablers. What would be the framing enablers are that your aspirations are, they are relevant, there is a reciprocity in them, there is a circularity in them, which means you have the basis for a circular economy. Mutuality, which means there is a mutual benefit, it's a win-win situation. Connectedness, it should be tied into the business itself. Redundancy, there should be an elimination of redundancy in the system. Modularity, which means you can implement it in stages. It need not be done all at once. Adaptability, which means you are agile enough to make changes depending on how the situation changes. And we should be humble about the whole thing. Once you have the framing enablers in place, these framing enablers give rise to process enablers. So based on the guidelines which are available in the framing enablers, you will have process enablers which are clearly defined boundaries. There will be an equivalence between benefit and cost. I mean, the cost benefit analysis will be done. There will be collective choice arrangements. Monitoring will be done. Graduated sanctions. There will be conflict resolution mechanisms put in place. There will be recognition of rights to organize amongst the employees. etc., etc. So and as I said, most organizations who are ESG compliant, who are sustainable, have established the enabling factors. They have, these can be in the form of SOPs which exist. This can be your HR manuals. These can be your various policies that you have in place. So these are structures which are already in place. But if you look at the enabling factors, you don't see environment in them, you don't see society in them. So that's the lacuna in the enabling factors. So what is now being expected from the strategy is that we need to move out of the enabling phase and we need to get into the activation phase. So what is the activation phase? In the activation phase, we're not looking at only ESG integration. What I mean by that is merely complying with ESG as a compliance requirement is not going to be our goal. We're going to be looking at investing into areas where parameters, metric-based parameters become relevant. So this is where your environment comes in, your social factors come in. And what happens is you're moving away from creating an impact value, which means what is my profit to the stakeholder. So you're moving away from that to a system of, to a situation of system value creation, which means the entire value chain is now being taken into account. Which means if I prosper, my suppliers are going to prosper, my customers are going to prosper, I'm not going to prosper alone. So we're moving from me to we. And finally, we're going to move away from fiduciary duty to strategic duty, where if you look at the third aspect which I talked about, which is the compliances, you're not going to only meet your basic legal requirements, but you're going to leverage the collective bargaining position to ensure that the entire value chain is going to improve. Which means not only am I going to grow, but those who are associated with me as part of my value chain, they're all going to grow together. So that is what is moving on from enabling to activation. But this is again not the end. I mean, here again, our goal is very limited. We're still looking at only us and the people who are directly connected with us. So it's still not the end. When I talk about transformation factors, which is the ultimate goal, what you're looking at is the entity is now a part of an ecosystem. So even those who are not associated with me, not connected with me, should grow. It should not be only me alone who has to grow or my value chain, but my value chain should also grow. So we are now talking about a large ecosystem. The entire society is growing. That's the transformation that we are looking at. That is the transformation that a sustainable business strategy talks about. So what it calls for is a modification in our ways of working. We need to start thinking differently. We're not to look only at profits, but we look at environmental factors like how can we improve efficiency? How can we produce the same amount by using less resource? How can we eliminate waste? How can we find other uses for waste? How can we eliminate emissions? How can we have well-being of our employees? How can we have good health? How can we create a good work-life balance? These are the kind of situations that you're now going to start talking about, rather than talking about profits all the time. So that's the modification that has to come in our way of thinking. One of the things which is being experimented with in Scandinavia, for example, is shortening the work week. Like instead of having a 40-hour work week, people are working 30 hours, and the remaining work is being distributed to others. So the number of work hours in a week don't reduce, but the number of people putting in those work hours increases. So you're creating more employment without by including more people into the workforce. So that's a different way of thinking to reduce unemployment. One is to increase jobs, but then jobs are limited. So reduce the number of hours that people work in the job so that others can get into the workforce. So that's a different way of thinking. These are the transformational factors, the innovations which are coming into our way of thinking. And this is finally what goes into build a sustainable business strategy. So having looked at what is a sustainable business strategy, just a couple more points that I want to touch upon today. One is we talked about stakeholder aspirations. How do you measure your stakeholder aspiration? So one thing which your stakeholder aspiration has to be is SMART. The SMART acronym has to apply to each one of those aspirations, which means it has to be specific, it has to be measurable, it has to be actionable, which means you can have steps to achieve it. It should be realistic, and it should be timely. There is no point in having an aspiration which takes forever to achieve. So once we have the aspirations mapped out, we apply the SMART acronym to them and ensure that the aspirations fit this threshold of SMART. And once we do that, once we have seen them, these are the steps which we will use. What are the aspirations? Why are they important? How are they going to be achieved? What is the time frame? And who is going to do it? So we will put all these aspirations through this matrix and then have a roadmap to achieving these aspirations. This is how you will create a truly sustainable business strategy. So to just repeat what I said, first is you have to understand your stakeholder needs. You have to define your stakeholder deliverables, develop tools for measuring these deliverables, because there is no point in saying, I'm expecting you to do this when I have no way of finding out if you are actually doing it or not. So you may have to create systems for measuring these deliverables as they get achieved. Automatically, when you're looking at reducing resources, increasing efficiency, you are going to have an innovation culture which comes up in the organization, because you're going to have to continuously improve your process. You're going to have to look at alternate ways of doing things. So you will have to create a flexible way of working and also be agile in your way of working. Without that, you can never achieve a situation where you're going to be meeting stakeholder aspirations. So in conclusion, what I would like to say is that a sustainable business strategy is a transformational business strategy which challenges the status quo. You cannot have business as usual and say that I am having a sustainable business strategy. Second, it's an inclusive strategy where all stakeholders are equally important. The lowest of the person in the lowest rung has an equal say in how the business, what he gets to benefit from the business. And finally, a sustainable business strategy considers the organization as a part of a larger ecosystem. And you work with the realization that I can be sustainable only if the entire ecosystem is sustainable. you cannot have a situation where you say, I mean, I don't care how the rest of society survives, I'm going to be successful. That thinking has to change. We have to go from me to we to us. Unless we start talking about us as a category, not even we have to go beyond we have to go to us. Look at the entire society and take the entire society forward with us. Unless our strategy is going to be geared up towards that, we're not going to have a business strategy which is sustainable. So that's what I had today to share with you all. Thank you very much for listening to me. And now I'm open to questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for this wonderful session we have. Everyone around have so many questions to ask us. All the participants have given so good questions. I personally have few very good and my personal takeaways. Like it's in high time that we all should decide to move from me to we. And also, I think personally, a point which I really like is that we should stop making aspiration that takes too much time to get fulfilled in life. So
Mhm.
I think that is one thing which every organization, as a person in an organization, also think about it. Moving ahead, sir, we have some very good questions. We are starting by the first question we have from Raksha Thakur. Dr. Raksha Thakur, she asked that how to check how sustainable is the organization culture and how to keep employees invested in it.
That's a very good question. And that is an area which is a challenge because this is something which calls for a robust HR policy. Your, I mean, a particular gripe against HR. I mean, I'm not a big fan of HR for the simple reason that HR in the organizations that I have worked with actually defeats the very constituency that they are working for. HR is supposed to be working for the employees and against the management. But in most cases, you will find that the HR is talking the management language rather than talking the employees' language. So the way to keep it invested is you need to ensure that the voices of the employees, their aspirations are clearly mapped, which doesn't happen. I mean, I know of very, very few organizations where the employee aspirations are mapped. So if you're not going to be listening to me for years on end, how do you expect me to be invested in you? I mean, my thought process would be, the person comes, blah, 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 goes away. I listen from here, I put it out from here. I couldn't care less. So if you really want to get my attention, if you want me to believe in what you're saying, then you try listening to what I have to say. So it has, as I said, that mutuality has to be there. That win-win situation has to be created. And unless you do that, you're not going to get the employees buy-in. You can pay them. I mean, money is not, I mean, today, maybe not in the current scenario, but most employees today, paycheck is just incidental. What they're looking for are other things besides paycheck. The intangibles. How is my work-life balance? How much time do I get to spend at home? You know, I mean, if my home life is full of stress, why would I want to come into a situation where my work life is also under stress? I don't want to be stressed at both ends. So the intangibles need to be in place. So if you can help me correct the intangibles, I assure you that I will be invested in you.
It's correctly said, sir, that we need to create a balance between both the tangible incentives and the intangible incentives to the
Yes.
employees. Very good. So I have a second question which I need to ask you, and that is, how do we assure if we are communicating sustainable practices to our consumers?
Sustainability is something which you practice. It's not something that you can preach. You have to walk the talk. People have to accept you as being sustainable. You can talk about it all you want, but if your actions prove otherwise, there is no way you're going to be accepted as being sustainable. So so coming to your specific question, if I am sustainable, I don't need to tell anyone that I am sustainable. The way I behave, the way my organization is transacting, whether it's a vendor, whether it's a supplier, whether it's a customer, they will speak for me. I don't need to speak. I mean, my vendors are sort of agents for me. If I am being fair, if I'm being transparent, if I'm being honest with my vendor, he is going to go and tell 10 other people that, look, I love working with this organization. You know, I mean, they honor their word. They treat me as a partner. So those are, and again, if it's a customer, if you're being fair and transparent with your customer is never going to leave you. Nobody is going to sacrifice a supply chain just for a few rupee profit, because peace of mind is something which is very, very important. So if you can assure peace of mind up and down the value chain, you're going to be sustainable, and you don't need to advertise about it.
So word of mouth is something which is more important for us than doing marketing in any other way.
Absolutely.
Sanjeev's are likely to say the
Uh,
word in bit. Yes, yes.
I wanted to add one of my experience here, and which is regarding Amazon. So some 6 year back or 7 year back, I shopped something from Amazon US, and I ordered something from Amazon US, and of course they charge a tax there. Which they say we will see what is the tax law is, and accordingly, if it is any refund comes, we will refund you. So but I said, okay, I am ordering this, let me order, for me this is the X price. Surprisingly, after 3 months, I find they refunded something like $40 to me, and I kept on scratching what for this refund is, and then I realized, okay, this was the thing which I ordered some 4 months back, for which refund automatically came to me. See, I was an overseas consumer for them, who was not even aware about the US laws. And that was the day I became an Amazon fan, and still, even as of date, I am one of our early adopter of the technology and online consumerism. And my 90% or 95% shopping happens on Amazon, and which is of a huge value every month. So that is what I guess the
Right.
sentiment Kumar was trying to communicate.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely, sir. What we practice is more important than what we state in the policy of article of association or memorandum of association. So we have a lot of questions coming in a way, keeping in mind the time constant we have for today. I take one, two questions more. The second question is how to reach a point for fixing sustainable goal of the company, keeping in mind the different needs of each stakeholder.
For that, if you to actually build a proper strategy, we need to actually go through the steps. I mean, I just touched upon it because we don't have time. Because that exercise is a live, ongoing exercise. It's not something which can be done over 20 minutes, or because you need to first sit down, and even noting down the aspirations of the stakeholders can take a few days, because there are so many aspirations. So the what stage itself can run into a week or a couple of weeks. Once you do the what, then you need to sit down and discuss and try and find out, are these smart? I mean, I can have an aspiration where I want to work only 6 months of the year and get paid for the whole year. I mean, is it smart? Is it realistic? I don't think so. So you have to contextualize your aspirations, ensure that they measure up to the SMART paradigm, and then you start asking the questions, why? Why are these aspirations important? If someone wants you know, let's say no a policy of no overtime, Why is it important? The owners may want that you have overtime all the time. But if the employees feel that they don't want to do overtime, then why? Why are they saying that this is an important aspiration for them? Maybe it is affecting their health. Maybe it is affecting their work-life balance. Maybe it's affecting relations at home. So you map that. Then once you have mapped, then you go to how. How are we going to ensure that we're going to meet this? How are we going to eliminate overtime? By when are we going to eliminate overtime? And who is going to be responsible for eliminating that overtime? So you have to go through all these steps and each one of these aspects. And when you go through this entire exercise, you will find that there are so many strands which are cross-linked. No aspiration is a standalone aspiration. If I'm going to eliminate overtime, I may need to increase manpower. The owners may not want to increase manpower. So there are others which are linked to it. So you need to start looking at how are these various linkages going to play out. So the exercise, it's not a one-off thing. You cannot finish it in, say, a day or a year. This is a live document which is going to remain in existence for as long as the organization exists. So your strategy keeps getting revised, maybe not daily, but as and when a new circumstance arises. Like nobody could think about a COVID-like situation. But once the COVID pandemic hit, you had to change your strategy. That factor has now come into your aspiration level.
Absolutely, sir. Going with the flow is the required thing. Yes, sir. Sorry, sir. I interrupted in between.
No. So that has to get incorporated into that live document as the document progresses. So you can say, I am sustainable as of today. I cannot guarantee that I will be sustainable tomorrow because I have not planned for something which is unplanned. But if my way of working is nimble, if my way of working is agile, if my systems can take these shocks, I can recover quickly from them and get back on my sustainability trajectory very quickly.
Going with the flow is the need of the hour for every company, and then they can understand the stakeholder needs. So
yes, but going with the flow, as long as you are not affecting the aspiration of any stakeholder.
Absolutely, sir. Yeah. So we have a number of questions with us, but looking at the time constraint, I will like to request Ms. Geeta Jain to come, Assistant Professor PIMR Indore, to kindly share a vote of thanks to sir for this wonderful enlightening session over the most required element of each business segment today, which is sustainable development. Ma'am, over to you.
Thank you so much, Divya. So it was indeed a pleasure listening to you. There was not even on a moment when we were doing anything else. We were continuously listening, absolutely engrossed in what you said. So it was an amazing session. Before I move on to a formal vote of thanks, I would just like to introduce Dr. Ranjana Patel. She did join a little while ago. But I just couldn't introduce the two of you. So she is the general manager of AIC Prestige Inspire Foundation. And of course, she works very closely with the startups and they work on model of sustainability and, look forward on the similar lines that you spoke about today. So that's Dr. Ranna Patel and that is
Hello.
Dr. Kumara.
Hello, sir. Good afternoon. It was a pleasure listening to you. However, I would like to admit that it was a very express session and we would like to listen more from you and, engage more with you because I really love this quadruple model and it does makes a lot of difference and that is wherein the sensitivity in organizations is required, as you have aptly pointed out, that you just can't think of one way of response all the time. It has to be a two-way relationship between the employer and the employee. So it was a pleasure, absolute pleasure listening to you, sir, and we look forward to having more such engaging sessions from you.
Thank you so much, Ranjana ma'am. So a formal vote of thanks now. Of course, she summed up. Divya has spoken a lot about this session today. I would just like to tell you what has been my key learning. So sustainable business, of course, it reaps significant financial advantages and attract more stakeholders, more interest from stakeholders was the one learning that I had from this session today. Uh, enabling to activation, understanding the ecosystem of sustainable business strategies. So it was just an amazing session and some great valuable inputs, boosting inputs for all of us. So thank you so much. I would like to express gratitude once again on behalf of Prestige Institute of Management and Research Indore. It was a complete pleasure to listening to you. Along with you, I would like to also thank all the panelists, Sanjeev sir, Ranjana ma'am, Manisha ma'am, Shad ma'am and Divya ma'am. Along with you, a very, very big thank you to all the participants for being with us for all the 3 days. And I'm sure that we'll see you around for next 2 days also. Have a great evening ahead. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Goodbye.